But this is a picture I pulled up the other day, and Julie Whitney took it, and I really like it. So I just put it on my cover slide. And in terms of what I'll be talking about today, yeah, a lot of things are changing, whether we like it or not. And so I have just been on this like personal quest in recent months to educate myself about things like, carbon footprints and electric airplanes, or just how far are we from some of these things I hear about but don't know a lot about. And so I wanted just to bring whoever's interested up to speed on where I'm at. And probably a bunch of you guys know more than I do about this stuff, but if you don't, maybe you'll enjoy getting to know a bit more. And then there's plenty more, as you'll see, that I'm trying to figure out, and I'm hoping some people might help me out along the way. But I guess the two big questions I was going to talk about today were, what will our airport operations look like in the next 20 years? And then are there things we can do in coming years to make our operation more sustainable? And some of this stuff might be touchy in certain circles, and I don't want it to be. I'm gonna tell you what I found, and I'm in no way like passing judgment. I have a footprint. I'm an aviation addict. I drive to and from the airport a long distance on the weekends. But here's what the topics that I'll cover today are. One, how climate change is affecting our operation, not just in the future, but now. I've started just a rough, I'm calling it a phase 1 inventory of our soaring operations carbon footprint, and put together some preliminary thoughts on action items and ways we might be able to work towards reducing our footprint. And financial feasibility is foremost on my mind. I realize some of these things will be wishful thinking, but yet I think it's important they're on our radar, and that way we can make thoughtful, informed choices moving ahead. And we're looking ahead to the future generations of pilots that we want to hand the airport off to in years to come. And also, I just see this great opportunity for an educational opportunity. Like I said, where you guys can learn, we learn together, but then I also look for ways where we can bridge the gap or just get to know each other better as club members. And then also we have a mix of older and younger folks, and we have a lot we can learn from each other through going through this type of exercise. And once again, just I'm talking about these things not intending to give people guilt trips about carbon footprints. I'm not passing judgment. We all have a footprint, so keep that in mind. That's not why I'm intending, or what my intent is here. First off, I've got some weird things on this slide, but I think I meant for this to be animated so Bob Ross wouldn't show up immediately. But anyway, I know Jay watched the great electric airplane race. It's that Nova PBS special that I sent out the link to. And I'm wondering if anyone else watched it. And if you did, what did you guys have any thoughts about it? And if no one wants to talk about it, that's fine. But I just figured I'd give people an opportunity to say a few words if it struck you. Or I was pretty blown away by it myself. I was like, I thought it was like a lot more distant future type stuff. I'm aware of what Beta's doing, but still it was like watching Nova was like, oh my gosh, this is actually going to happen sooner than I thought. So anyway, let me just open it up. Does anyone have any impressions or thoughts if you happen to watch it?
Well, I imagine a lot of people would have noticed it, but it just, watching that round the world flight with the solar, I can't think of the name of the aircraft right now. And a one shot from inside the cockpit where he looks like he's got all the instrumentation of an F-18, and there's a yaw string.
I pulled your picture. Yeah, that was great, Jay. Thank you. Of course he has a yaw string. No, I know. Yeah, that was, I was noticing that stuff too. Yeah, that solar impulse flight was amazing. But I don't know. Did anyone else have any thoughts or impressions? Or
I watched it, Jen. It was a great show. And can you see me okay?
Yeah, I could see you.
Okay,
Yeah,
I just kind of weird looking. I'm looking, I don't see myself on the screen.
gotcha.
Anyways, but it was great. It was interesting, you know. I think hydrogen for larger airplanes is I've been following that. And, you know, I think you know, the problem with the batteries for, I think for smaller airplanes that it definitely makes sense in commuters, but you know, larger airplanes, it's just, I think they're going to have to crack the hydrogen equation. And I know people have been working on that, working on it, but you know, I don't know. But I thought it was really interesting, the concept of the hydrogen combined with electric. I thought that was a new concept, and I thought that was really
Worked great
interesting.
for the Hindenburg.
What'd you say, Tim? That it worked for the
I said it
Hindenburg?
worked great for the Hindenburg.
I know what could go wrong.
What could
um,
possibly? Yeah, yeah,
no, but Kevin, yeah, he certainly has a platform to speak. He was retired airline pilot, but that was one thing that struck me too, Kevin. That yeah, the airliners, the jetliners are going to be a tough nut to crack because the weight issue or everything you said there is like, okay, how do we solve those issues to jet people around the way we're doing today? That
yeah,
versus yeah, the smaller electric aircraft that seems more doable.
yeah. And I think, you know, the autonomous vehicle thing is interesting, but from my experience, you know, when the computer gets inputs, and I had some really interesting experiences sometimes where there was a faulty input to the flight guidance system, and we had to, you know, disconnect and fly. And so
Hmm.
I find that a fascinating subject, and especially, you know, with some of the, you know, the irregularities of weather, and you know, when the weather doesn't do what the forecast says. And I mean, I don't know, just it's interesting, but you know, I would like to be optimistic about it.
Mhm.
Anyways,
Jen, I got
Yeah,
a comment
no, it's
about
good.
Jen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hey.
I thought it was interesting and highly optimistic. The thing they didn't address is where does all that energy come from? The amount of energy it takes to lift a, you know, major airliner up in the air and then, you know, 3,000 miles away is a lot of energy. And I can't envision replacing that easily unless they address where it comes from. Solar isn't going to do it, I don't think, without changing the climate from solar itself, or nuclear, which everybody seems to think has no role. I don't see where they've explained all that. Even if the energy was available, where does it come from? If it can be
well, you have
stored.
nuclear submarines.
What's that, Kevin?
We have nuclear submarines.
Nuclear submarines. Okay. Yeah.
And
Can I
I
jump in
saw
here?
a show on Nova recently about Norway has a major nuclear project, and a kind of a really interesting storage of the waste. And they were going to be able to power the country for like the next 150 years with this.
Huh.
So
But my point is, shouldn't those things be addressed simultaneously? That's why I say this was an optimistic outlook without addressing the question of where does the energy come from. It's not coal, it's not oil. Solar and wind is great, but I just can't imagine that amount of energy coming from solar and wind that'll fly, you know, the millions of passengers every day in big heavy airplanes, even with electric power.
Yeah. No, I think that'll certainly be a tough nut to crack. And I think at least what they were featuring in the show is more the smaller stuff, which seems more within reach in the immediate term. Or I don't know, by immediate, I'm not saying like next year, although that what was it called, Joby Aviation. Just so you guys know, with next week's talk, Lockie and Alex will be telling us about Beta up in Burlington and the work they're doing. And Joby, who is featured in Nova, is apparently one of their main rivals, or their main rivals. So maybe yeah, Lockie and Alex can talk more about that, but Dave, I don't think they'll address the issue you're raising about getting, things like the jetliners and moving larger groups of people around. These are just smaller, much smaller scale. So,
Paul here.
Is that Paul?
Oh, yeah. May I speak?
Please go ahead.
I'm on the phone. Okay, so I'm guilty of taking intercontinental flights for pleasure, and it weighs on my conscience because, I mean, the equivalent energy consumption to get to soar versus taking a plane to New Zealand. You know, I haven't done the calculations. I think it would be really depressing. But it's given me pause about. I would really like to go back to New Zealand again. Love the people there. Love my time spent there. But I mean, it's really probably 90% of my contribution to global warming is taking those really long flights. So I don't know. It just seems like we're flying more and more and more because we have this model that the economy has to keep growing, and people have to accrue more and more wealth. Otherwise, everything falls apart. Well, that's true, but you know where that leads. So that's my comment.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. I know it's just we're having more and more of an awareness of our impact, or just when you make a decision about going to New Zealand, this carbon footprint factors in more than maybe in the past when we've done this thing. And now we know more, and it's like, okay, it's up to each person, I guess, to figure out how to navigate this. But anyway, I'm gonna move ahead and then talk more about, I guess, our own operation. But thank you for sharing some thoughts, and I look forward to continuing this discussion with all of you. And just so you guys know why Bob Ross is on the slide, it's I was hanging out with I'm sure maybe you were wondering, I don't know, but I was hanging out with Andy, Tom, and Will on the second floor on Saturday night, and we were going through the TV channels, and honestly, I think it was like channel number 1274, and we couldn't find anything we wanted to watch except for Bob Ross, and it was very soothing. But like, I was like, okay, if people are trying to figure out what to watch, and you're in that situation, watch the great electric airplane race, and or that would be my pick. So, but I just couldn't believe how much is on TV because I don't watch TV really. But yeah, that was eye-opening. Okay, and yeah, this was the picture that Jay sent me of the yaw string on Solar Impulse. So I don't know if Owen's on, or is Owen there? Because Owen, I've got a bunch of pictures of you in the slideshow. But those of you who were back at the airport 2015, remember Owen used to bring his Jeep over. He painted it black, and it was battery powered. And so this huge event happened in October of 2015 where he pulled the 126. Granted, it was downhill, but like he did pull it with his Jeep, and it was a big event. And it's like, looking back at that, I think Owen was a visionary. So I'll be talking more about electric and golf carts later on. So I guess I was just gonna start by talking about climate change and our operation in regard to the weather we're getting, and what, not just, well, now, I guess what we're seeing now we anticipate is going to carry into the future. But you've I'm sure seen, all of you at this point, just the reports where it's like, okay, yep, we'll have more intense storms, which we have indeed seen. We're seeing more days where it's not a rain out day, but we can't fly because the winds are just too strong, and it's just too turbulent. Density altitude, I mean, it's only June, and we're not even into July and August. And just this past weekend, man, we had some takeoffs off at 2-2 where we just weren't climbing out well, and it's that high density altitude. And on the next slide, I'll talk a bit more about just how we need to have that conversation more in our safety briefings, or just maybe adapt our launch and take off and climb out procedures, or just brief the glider pilots more on exactly where the tow pilot wants you to position yourself to give us a better chance of climbing out more efficiently. Also, just the fact we're going to get more extremes. I'll talk more about that too. It seems a bit counterintuitive. You could have drought, but then forecast for more overall more precipitation, all in the same year. But it's possible. And then just the melt freeze cycles. Like you can have a snow load that melts because it warms up but doesn't melt fully. Then it freezes, and then you end up with heavier snow loads. And hangars that can't structurally handle some of those heavier loads. And then just gosh, Monday we had that crazy wind, or I wasn't there, but certainly seeing Tom's picture that he texted of us parking vehicles on the south side, or just trying to block the wind from our aircraft that we have to tie down outside, brought back some bad memories. But the wind blockades, and I think this is just part of our new reality that we have to be prepared for and do the best we can to, I guess, put ourselves in position to make it through these types of events. And density altitude, this was a calculation I did, or there's websites that you can pull up to do these. This is actually from 2019. There was a day, it was July 4th actually, where we had no wind. It was the heat of the day at noon. And it was another one of those days where we were just climbing out very poorly. And, I plugged in 1,500 feet for the airport elevation. It was 82 degrees. I mean, we've had temperatures already in the 90s. So I could up that. But the density altitude on that day was equivalent to about 3,200 feet. And so you definitely notice that in the performance of the aircraft and the tow plane. And other considerations on top of just what you plug into this type of calculator are just what's the wind doing, how heavy are you, what's the slope of the runway, and then the sink and rotor we get off the end of the runway sometimes. So yeah, it's just one more thing we have to pay a bit more attention to. And when I saw this picture of this stack up of gliders from competition days, I was like, oh my gosh, we need all the runway we can get these days. But obviously they were able to get everyone off the ground and into the air in this situation in the past. Another thing, we've been getting rain lately, but water use is something we haven't really had to think about much here in New England in the past, or I haven't, I guess, paid attention to it at this level, but my dad is very keyed up about it. And we're nowhere near, thankfully, in the red blotches of the Southwest. We are in the yellow and the peach. And so in the Northeast, yeah, it's not as bad as the West, but we are in abnormally dry or moderate drought conditions here. And so we need to think maybe about things like, well, if we're washing a lot of aircraft on a given day, just be conscientious about our water usage, or if during camps, kids are taking long showers. We just have to maybe think about things a bit differently than we did before. And then maybe in the future, we could set up even a rain catchment system. I don't know. I've done it at our various homes before, and it works fine. You can even get, sap tanks or big areas or big containers to store water, and we could use it for washing planes and other things. But anyways, just, yeah, something else that's kind of different that needs to be on our radar. And then it was really eye-opening to me too with this year, Lake Champlain. A number of folks here I know go boating on Lake Champlain, and it was 2 feet below normal in April. We got a little bit of rain to bump that up, but then it's back on its downward trajectory. And the fact that Mount Mansfield only had 13 inches of snow when they typically would have up to 50 inches was a real eye-opener to me. And so anyway, it's just once again, I'm not sure, maybe next year they'll be back to having flood stage waters in Lake Champlain, but for now, yeah, it's just something else for us to keep on our radar. And so just circling back to kind of summarize some thoughts. One, just I think we have to anticipate going into the future, we're likely going to have to cancel more flights due to high winds than we did in the past. We have to be on our game with these high density altitude takeoffs, make sure they're part of our safety briefings. When we position the gliders for takeoff, we need to push them back more than we did maybe in the past. And then, as mentioned, when we're climbing out, the glider needs to really make sure they're staying in position, not getting up to higher than the tow plane. We just need to, yeah, make sure we're briefing each other and on our game. And then just being vigilant about the weather, which is something I think, we've gotten good about, but it's easy to get complacent. But we just have to be on high alert for winds. The forecast, I mean, I think both days I was there this past weekend, things didn't play out as the forecast had suggested. So that storm, we had a pop-up thunderstorm on Saturday while Alex was up with Gitvik, and that happened very quickly. So we just have to be ready. They did a great job getting the gliders tied down. And then we have, if you look at how we have our 233 and ASK tied down, they're double or triple tied around different places, not just the same, single point failure. And then Carl, thank you so much for your generous donation of the Kevlar rope. And then we just have to hope that there's no hail. I mean, that was, what day was it, Monday, where we had those wicked storms coming through, and you're helpless. You just have to hope that it won't happen to hit us. So ideally, in the future, this is something we all know and would love to have. If we could get hangars, obviously we need structurally sound hangars. We don't have any quick, easy solutions to this issue, but if we're looking ahead, it'd be great if we can get all our aircraft under cover, because we know these storms are going to be happening with greater frequency. And thank you all who were there on Monday, who helped get things tied down, and I'm glad you guys rode out the storm okay. I don't know, Tom or anyone else, do you guys have anything to add about operations and just the weather conditions that we've come to experience more often?
I've had to move over here to the, I think you covered it all very well. I mean, the high density altitude takeoffs and the options or the lack of options available, and the winds. Maybe the pandemic has left my memory in the past, but I don't remember winds like what we've been experiencing. The raggedy sort of the shifting, the amount of winds in June are what I would have thought were May, personally. Just from but maybe that slipped over the years, or my memory slipped as I gotten older. But I totally agree. And from an operational standpoint, the other thing is the team so far, knock on wood, has been able to respond to things very well with help. Bill Martin helped us the other day when we had to put stuff away, that nobody gave up and just got in their car and drove away when things went bad with the weather. Everybody hung in and took care of each other. And I think that that's the key, that we have to be more keyed into that. One of the things that Dane and Danny and I have been talking about is installing an extra set of tie downs down by the runway 22 gazebo. If there's only one line person and one tow pilot and one instructor, and we've got 3 gliders out for some reason, and we're like, holy crap, the bad storms are coming through, then we only have to really put away 2, and we could tie something down temporarily. So we're looking at options for that. The claw is just not strong enough for that, so we might have to bury some concrete rebar, traditional tie downs there. But yeah,
We used to tie down a 233 down there. I don't know if there's still any tie downs in the ground from that or what we're using, but they used to do that.
Do you have a metal detector? Actually, it would probably go off like crazy down there just because of all the buried crap.
Yeah.
But I think it is worth something. And the other thing that we're looking at is every time we park the tow plane, we're locking the brakes. We're putting the parking brakes on so it doesn't swing around and slide down the hill into the pond. And a club that we were at in pre-pandemic, when Jen and I were traveling around, they had a tradition a procedure every time they pulled the tow plane up to the regular parking spot. They had a concrete tie down, and they had a cable with a clip. They put the wing, they tie it down every time with one tie down to ensure that it didn't depart the area and go dragging down. So so we really should look at that. It gives us, it worries me when we only have a couple people on duty and we've got a number of aircraft out and the wind comes up. I'm still a little traumatized from the 233 incident. So that's what I've got, Jen.
Okay.
Jen, may I add something?
Paul,
Go ahead. Whoever went first. I couldn't recognize your voice, but please go ahead.
I'm gonna defer to whoever else that was, and I'll go after.
Okay.
okay, Paul here. I don't, sorry, I don't know what the answer is, but lightning on the field really frightens me. So, like I said, I don't know what the answer is, but if there's a pop-up lightning storm and we're putting up planes, that's a very, very dangerous situation. A young person was killed at a vegetable farm where I lived in Bedford, and exactly that. Well, he was killed by lightning. He was out in the field. It happens. It happens. We're not used to lightning storms around here, and maybe that has something to do with climate changing, that they're coming more frequently. But okay, that's my comment.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. Yeah. Whoever was first, please go ahead.
The one thing that I was going to add was another kind of human factors thing, which was just with the higher temperatures and UV index, hydration, heat stroke, sunscreen,
very
all that
good.
kind of stuff.
Yeah. Very
I know
good.
I've had times before where I've realized like I'm really not on my game because I'm not hydrated enough, not paying attention to how the heat's affecting me. I think especially maybe for the line crew, if we're a little younger, not as used to having to not that's maybe not something that's on our minds as much. Definitely something that's important to pay attention to and be careful about.
Oh yeah. No, that's a great point. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Absolutely should go on this list. Thank you. Yep. Okay. Good. Well, let me see. Just given what else I was hoping to cover. Oh, I don't know if Owen's there. I had to stick in this picture of Owen in the hangar if you guys can see it, but he used to fit in there, but no longer. So for this last part, I want to get into what I'm calling this phase 1 inventory of our carbon footprint at 0 Bravo 7. And this is very much a work in progress, and I welcome any feedback. Like I said, there's probably some of you that know quite a bit more about this stuff than I do, and I'm just pulling stuff off the internet or wherever I can find it. But here's some of the stuff I've pulled up so far. Like first off, what emissions are we talking about in regard to the greenhouse gas emissions that we're ideally trying to reduce? The main ones they list on websites, or like in this case, I think this was one of the EPA or NRDC websites, are carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, water vapor, and then you have some synthetic gases, the fluorinated gases. And so you can see the carbon dioxide is 76% of that pie chart, and then the methane 16%, and nitrous oxide 6%, fluorinated gases 2%. But then if you look at the chart on the left, and what's called global warming potential of those gases, the carbon dioxide, even though it makes up the biggest amount, 76%, has the lowest warming potential, whereas those fluorinated gases like the HFCs have a tremendous global warming potential. So even though they make up a smaller piece of the pie, they have a really big impact. So just, yeah, all sorts of things to keep in mind. And I'm sure you could pull different numbers off different sources, but this is, I think, the gist of it. You'd see similar proportions. So where are these coming from? Well, once again, people have different ways of categorizing things, but this is a diagram off the EPA website. And so they say transportation makes up about a third, or more specifically or precisely 29% electricity, 25% industry, 23% commercial and residential, 13% and agriculture, 10%. And so if you look into each piece of that pie, then you can dig deeper, but that's just bigger picture. I'm not going to get into any of that sort of stuff. And then I was like, well, let's see, how do we go about even calculating our carbon footprint? And then you search around online and you can find a number of different calculators. And I was playing around with the EPA one, and in the end I could go pull it up, but I can also just make sure people can get links or have access to this PowerPoint, and you can play around with it yourself. I was trying to find one that's aviation oriented, but none of the ones I found were relevant to our operation. They were more for bigger airports with jets and everything. Yeah, this ACERT, do-it-yourself airport greenhouse gas inventory tool didn't really work for me. But once again, if anyone else has sources of this type of information, I welcome your feedback. And one thing I was looking at, just some general themes when you get into these calculators, are they look at things like, okay, how many gallons of gasoline did you use? And then air travel, but that's just for the jetliners. They have like 22 pounds of CO2 per gallon of gas is what they seem to use fairly consistently in these calculators. And then you can see, so for each different source, they've assigned an amount of CO2 that goes along with that, the kilowatt hours. So if I get a hold of our electric bill from the airport, I'd plug that information in, and so on. Gallons of propane, that would be another area I could actually get some numbers. So anyway, it's interesting, and there's nothing I found specifically for the type of flying we do, but maybe it's out there, and or maybe we just end up figuring out how much gasoline we're burning, whether it's flying the tow plane or driving golf carts and mowing. So then the next question is, well, okay, that's nice, but can you actually do anything about it? And it looks like, yes, we can. And none of it's necessarily easy, but some things are actually low hanging fruit. And it's just kind of a matter of us prioritizing or deciding, okay, yes, this is something that's important to us and it makes financial sense, so let's go ahead and do it. So as far as the next step in the inventory, it would be, okay, I'm going to bother Gail and see if I can get a hold of copies of our electric bills from the last several years, given 2020 is not going to be representative since we were shut down, but looking back before that, propane bills, I'll try and get those, and then hopefully I can figure out gasoline, like how much, I don't know if we can, with the fact that gasoline prices fluctuate, I imagine I could get receipts or ideas of how much we've spent on gas, but as far as how many gallons we've consumed, maybe we'll just have to work on that this year based on our current consumption, and then move ahead with that. Also, yeah, diesel we use for the tractor. So aviation fuel is probably going to be easier for us to track because there's good accounting of that. And then things like waste and recycling bills, I can probably get a hold of those too. And so once we get that information and figure out, get a better sense of our footprint in these different areas, then we can go about seeing if there's anything we can do to reduce emissions now and into the future. It would be a phased approach. We'd once again consider costs. That would be a driving force. But then again, we also want to do the right thing where we can. And if we shift from gas to electric, we also want to consider where that electricity is coming from. And I use the quotes for clean because there's a lot that can go, well, clean is, yeah, open to interpretation. But I guess in terms of, if we're defining it as how much carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases are being emitted to generate that electricity, ideally we can find a provider that is doing that as responsibly as they can at this point. And then, yeah, there's going to be areas where we can't address our footprint. So do we want to consider voluntary carbon credits, or actually I want to propose a different idea, and I'll talk more about that at the end. So our electric provider, I'm not certain of this, but I'm pretty sure it's Green Mountain Power. I don't know. Does anyone know that?
Yes, that's
Is
correct.
it? Okay. All right, thanks. So you can go on their website and they'll say, okay, our energy supply is 95% carbon free and more than 64% renewable. And a lot of it comes from Hydro-Quebec, which maybe in terms of carbon emissions is good, but certainly has had footprints in other ways. And so, yeah, large hydro makes up 55% of their energy mix. And then you can see on the pie chart, the next biggest, I guess, yeah, it looks like it's nuclear. And so my action items on this is to ask Gail for a copy of electric bills. And then we have people like Andy Olson and Paul Shekel, who I probably will contact to seek out advice, or I already started talking to Andy, given his past experiences, and he used to do solar installations and still knows a heck of a lot about whether solar would ever make sense for the airport and things like siting considerations. Whether or not we end up going that direction in the future, I don't know, but I'd like to learn more about whether it makes sense or what their thoughts are, and then be aware of incentive programs that might make better financial sense for us, or just I'd love to, yeah, be able to find a way to make that happen and be generating our own power where possible. So going down our more specific list for emissions, obviously one is the tow plane. And so I'll talk about that first before I get into the golf carts. And so with the tow plane, we have two Pawnees, and they're both a bit old, right? But they're doing great. The 84 or 14 Lima is a 1969 aircraft, and then 84 Pop is 1974. So we're still using the technology from that era. We have Lycoming 0540 engines, and yeah, action items, like I mentioned, we can figure out fuel consumption using that information, and these calculators, we can figure out an estimate of our emissions. And then seeing as there's nothing we can do in the immediate term for replacing our tow plane with something else, although I look forward to hearing Alex and Lockie talk next about the technologies that are coming online or that they see as coming online. Anyway, in the immediate term, we'll consider things like carbon offsets. And as mentioned, I couldn't find a calculator specific for gas-powered piston aircraft. Maybe there's something out there. If not, it's not the biggest deal. We can just use what's available and figure it out the best we can. Yeah, like I said, those available resources are all geared towards the jetliners, which do have a much bigger footprint. And then one thing that is a major bummer with the tow plane is the leaded fuel. And I mean, we use it for our Taylor craft as well, and the other general aviation planes. There are a lot of them, not all of them, but you know, if you go to the FAA website, they talk about it, and it just sounds like it's not going anywhere anytime soon. Like I'm guessing we'll probably go electric with a tow plane before we go unleaded. I don't know if that's how it'll play, but it just seems like we're stuck in this zone of not meeting, you know, there's not an option that meets the demands of the EPA, but, and then also the realities of our aviation community. It's like, well, we couldn't afford to put a new engine into our tow planes. And they can't seem to come up with a fuel, and they don't really have probably the incentives given just how much how many people are buying this type of fuel compared to how many buy, like, you know, Jet A. I don't know if things will tip in our favor at any time soon, but for now it seems like we're stuck with the 100 low lead. I don't know, does anyone have anything to say on that before I move on? I don't want to get into a big discussion on it, but I also don't know all that much about it, other than I'm bummed. we we still have leaded gas for airplanes.
Jen, Phil Martin,
Yes.
before we hear Alex and Lucky in the next couple of weeks, and we started off talking about what things might look like in 20 years. Is it possible
Mhm.
that we would come out here and find electric tow planes? Is that even conceivable, that those engines could develop that power that's necessary and then go on for several hours in the day?
I'll give you a sneak peek into next week and say that
Okay, good, Alex.
say fewer than 10 years before that's a realistic, potentially fewer than 5 years.
Really? Well, 5 to 10 years is possible, maybe.
I mean, we're flying on engines already that are powerful enough. The question is getting the FAA to say that we can put them in other planes and certify them.
And if you think about the maintenance on an electric motor, it's bearings and magnets, right? And the battery, of course, is like, but the maintenance would be the airframe, the control surfaces, the motor would be much more reliable, I think, in the long run, in an electric motor, because you don't have the opposing, pistons flying back and forth and all the stuff flying around. And Alex has given me a sneak preview of some of the motors that they're working on. And I believe that the power of the motor is there, and the motors are lighter than the 540 that's in our tow plane right now. The battery is the question, of course, but even if we had some kind of quick change battery system, so batteries here being, we'd go out and do 10 tows, 5 tows, whatever it is.
Pull it out.
And yes, probably a forklift, but, but yeah,
Well, I
possible.
don't know if they're that heavy overall. Carl Brandon was showing me the batteries in his, what is it? Electric car.
Tesla.
Yeah, and they're just made up of all small batteries, so you can make the chunks as large or small as you wish.
I looked at it in a funny, between the total weight of the motor and a single battery pack compared to the weight of a motor and a full hopper, probably about the same.
About the same.
And it's a powerful motor.
About 400 horsepower.
And it acts right away.
400 horsepower, all torque. Just like Will's car and Alex's car. Those things off the line are amazing. And so I'm thinking about towing to rotor as kind of a guy who's traditional with the piston engine. And I'm thinking about having that power, that torque to pull something through the rotor. I think it would be an animal. I think it would be an awesome thing. So we're all positive here, Jen. Go ahead.
All right, thanks.
You got-
Yeah, no, I get excited about this stuff, so thank you for chiming in, Alex, and good question, Bill. Okay, on to golf carts. So our current fleet. So as you guys know, like the one on the left, that's our newest, most reliable one, and Maddie likes it the most. That's the dog there, Steve's dog. And then the middle one, sure, we love her, but she's a bit temperamental, and you have to know just right how to feather her her gas pedal just right to get her to go. And even then, she might not go initially, but anyway, she's still online, but anyway, yeah. And then the frog is in a sad state, but has been in a sad state before and come back to life. So I'm not counting the frog out, but for now, she has a very flat tire, and she wasn't running the last time I tried. She sounded like she wanted to, but just know we'll need to address this at some point. And so once again, I want to go back to Owen and his visionary role with his Jeep. I think we'll need a little something more than this, but he was towing Ethan around for the 2015 Line Crew Olympics, and he did run out of battery halfway through the golf cart challenge course. And so Jackson and Carson were kind enough to to help him through the finish line. But and then yeah, Nick, I know you're on there, so I had to show this picture of Nick was driving the frog and with his dad, who was holding a glass of water. Part of the challenge was to see how much water spilled out of the cup as they drove through the slalom course. And so this was a fun challenge. And I remember Dane, if Dane's there, throwing, well, he took a turn very rapidly, and we didn't know Dane very well at that point, but his sister was in the cart for a little while, and then she exited the cart after that turn, and we were all just a bit shocked by what happened, but no one was injured. So yep, a good time was had by all.
I think there was a lot more air than water in that cup at that point when this photo's taken.
Yeah, you took it slow, I remember, Nick. And then I think everyone after that just didn't care because they assumed if you had done that slow and lost the water, they would too. So yeah, so golf carts, we need them. We rely on them very heavily, and we know we'll need to replace them in the not too distant future. So do we go down the same path as usual and get another gas powered cart or two, or are batteries at a point where we can consider going electric? And so I'm proposing, and I've talked to a number of people already about us investigating going electric, or at least looking into it. And it may not end up working for us at this time, but I think it'd be a really fun exercise and good educational opportunity. And so the ground rules, because we've launched a lot of ideas in the past and they haven't always worked out. But one, it must make financial sense if we're going to go electric, and it needs to pass the Tom and Rick laugh test. And then it cannot become yet another great idea that gets started by someone and then dumped on someone to clean up in the end. And so of all the people I've talked to about this, I've talked to Danny and Get Fake the most, so I hope you don't mind, but I just put you guys down as the leads. But we're happy to have as many people involved as would like to be. And then Buddy and Alex have agreed to be mentors. And then I just put Tom and Rick down as laugh testers because they always are anyway. And so it'll have to get past them if it has any hope of actually being implemented. And then like starting points, like how do we even go about figuring this out? I think this is a really fun project. One, I'm hoping someone can look into whether any other soaring operations are successfully using electric golf carts to tow gliders right now. And then talk to Gitvic about characterizing our current golf cart usage. So if we can figure out things like how much do we drive on average in a normal day, how much do we need to tow? The ASK 21's our heaviest glider, and that's 842 pounds empty weight. And so if we're towing that up the hills, that's going to be a challenge. And then ideally, we want it to carry up to 4 people. Other things we want to characterize are what do we spend now on gas for the golf carts and maintenance. And then if we do look into getting a new or a newer used gas-powered golf cart, how much would that cost? And then if we can find an electric, Buddy recommended that if we actually want this to happen someday, we should get just an electric cart that we can mess around with instead of trying to build something from scratch. But then if we do get an electric golf cart, are there batteries available these days that could actually meet our needs? And if so, how much do they cost? What is their life expectancy under the type of operation we'll be doing? And then if we're, closed for the winter, you need to keep your batteries happy. And then charging station, that's going to be a really interesting question in itself too. Like ideally we could charge these during the day while there's sunlight, but then if we don't get sunlight for a while, we need to be able to plug in at night. And so would we have stations at the gazebos, portable solar panel that could actually, do enough to charge them? But there's all kinds of questions around how that would work. And yeah, maybe we could find someone to donate an electric golf cart. I don't know, but we'd have to think that through before putting word out. And then are there incentive programs we could tap into? There's a big emphasis, obviously, on climate change right now, and maybe there'd be incentives to set up a charging station. I don't know anything about that, what's available, but I just want us to get up to speed on that in case an opportunity presents itself. Okay, so then we get into the mowing. First off, yeah, what about the golf cart? Are people into this idea or are willing to go along with this for now with us trying to figure this stuff out? Anyone else have experience with this type of thing? and knowledge to impart. Um, and no one has to answer that now, actually. We can, I'll just finish up the rest of my slides and we can circle back to this later. But just know that I think this would be a great project. All right, so mowing, I guess my animations aren't working, but so yes, we do have this Kubota tractor. It's owned by Granite, and Owen, he soloed the tractor for the first time a week or so ago. So that's quite a jump up from his little Jeep from years past. What's going on with the tractor electric industry, or just where are they with, cars are certainly on a fast track, it seems, electric cars to be more and more common. And then what about the tractors? Well, this is a press release from January 2020, and it looks like Kubota, and if you go to the John Deere website, they have stuff too about releasing these prototype electric tractors. So they're coming too. I just don't know much about where they're at, and if they're going to be at a price point that we could consider in years to come. But I just want those to be on our radar too. With mowers, yeah, so we have this lovely push mower that Tom and I donated to the line crew just love. But I bought a 40-volt electric mower for my parents that I used here, and it works very well. I think it could suit our needs at the airport. We'd certainly keep the gas one as a backup. But I also now have, the electric leaf blower and weed whacker that also work perfectly fine. And it'd be nice if we could wean ourselves or transition to having those and using those. So those would be, in my eyes, some of the lower hanging fruit we could actually address pretty quickly, especially if we set up a carbon offset fund. We could use it to buy things like this type of equipment. So for the mowing, action items would be get up to speed on status and cost of electric equipment, and then purchase it as able. Figure out gas usage for the mowing. We do a lot of mowing. And so also maintenance, we have had to do quite a bit of maintenance. I know, well, the Cub Cadet's back up and running, which is great, but maybe we can get a sense of how much we spend on that type of stuff. Also, consider leaving some areas unmowed that we've mowed in the past and turn them into pollinator gardens. I know there's an area that's traditionally wet down by the Tutu end, or well, that's not describing it very well, but there's some areas that we've already started to let grow, and I think that's another good strategy. And then, yeah, with the electric tractor, if we have someone tracking that, it would be Granite that would be making that purchase in the future, but we could keep Granite posted on what we find, and we'd be the ones operating it for the most part. And so it'd be great if we could pick something that actually suits our needs well. Anyway, so that's for mowing, and then just finishing up with the last couple things. The tower building, also owned by Granite. So buildings do produce a lot of direct and indirect emissions. Things that we have going on in our building include heating and cooking with propane, electric. We have the wood stove. We have a water heater, which is electric, a tank water heater, and then air conditioning and refrigerators. I'll get on the next slide. Sorry, I'll talk about those HFCs. And then, yeah, the dishwasher. That's the fancy one for that meets the health department standards. So it gets things very hot, and it probably does consume a fair amount of energy. And then we do have a lot of computers, printers, all the stuff we're charging all the time. The building, it was built a certain way for a certain purpose. And so to retrofit it and get it to a point where it would be like LED certified, or, LEED certified, or, carbon neutral, I don't think would be realistic or a good investment of resources. So we'd be looking ahead potentially to other infrastructure in the future where we could set those goals and realistically achieve them. But we can do things in the meantime to, I guess, reduce our footprint at the tower. And one thing that's happening, regardless of what we do, is just with the air conditions and refrigerators. Some of you might have seen that with the hydrofluorocarbons, which have that big greenhouse gas equivalent. In the earlier diagram I showed, these have a really big impact. So they're found in refrigerators, the refrigerant that's in air conditions and refrigerators. They're trying to phase out these HFCs that are really bad for the emissions, and then starting to transition to alternatives like carbon dioxide, which is kind of ironic, and then ammonia. But it's in the midst of the rulemaking process. This was from May 19th, and just it'll be an interesting thing to track. But we do have a refrigerator and we do have air conditioners in the tower, obviously. So it's something we can keep in mind if we replace any of those units in the future. And then I just have this one slide on, waste disposal. And it just makes sense financially. You want to reduce your waste stream where you can. Danny and Dane are going to be working on setting up a better recycling station. We want to have a better system for separating the bottle deposits or can deposits, because the line crew want to raise money. We use that to raise money. And then, with food waste, we're not operating a restaurant this year, but it'd be nice if we could work towards setting up a system for the food waste and composting, and maybe have an airport garden at some point. And then plastic water bottles do drive me crazy still. So I know Tom has his aluminum water bottle that he bought when he flew back from San Francisco when he visited his mom. And it's like, that's all they sold at the airport there in San Francisco. And man, he's reusing it. He's had it for months. Can we move towards something like that? Maybe we can. And with carbon credits, I looked into your options. They have the whole voluntary carbon credit marketplace. And I don't know, other people may know more about it than I do, but I found it to be quite complicated, confusing, and it seems to be in flux, where they're trying to figure out standards and accountability. And so I was like, oof, I think, you have to figure out a specific project that I guess suits your what you want. And I'm like, that would take time to research. And why don't we just, in the end, I was like, why don't we set up our own fund that's more transparent and closer to home? And we could just, if we figure out how much, our Pawnee, if we're looking at our own footprints, like, okay, I took this many flights and tows, and I drove, this many miles to get to the airport, and I feel guilty, or I want to contribute something, then maybe we have our own little 0 Bravo 7 fund, and we use whatever is contributed to buy things like an electric mower, and chip away over time at phasing some things out. And it would be totally voluntary. And it's just one thought. I don't know if it's a good one,